Today's guest is Mitch Freed, CEO of Genumark. Building on the foundation his father Mark created, Mitch has taken Genumark into a bold new era. They're a true industry leader, ranking number 47 on the PPI 100 and trusted by clients including Equinox, Lyft, Hyundai, and the NBA. It was great to reconnect with Mitch, and this conversation is packed with insights on leadership, legacy, and what it takes to win in today's market. I learned a lot, and I think you will too. Let's get into it. We'd love to just hear about your story. Obviously, I know your dad started Genumark, and
Well, sort of.
Sort
it's
of.
It's not that simple.
Okay, so
actually.
let me hear it.
Okay, so my dad by trade was a litigation lawyer, and my dad actually came from a family business background as well, particularly in the department store business, menswear, actually men's clothing. He grew up in a very small Canadian city, called Windsor, Ontario. Um, he which is like on the border of the US and Canada. It's right next to Detroit. So he grew up there. At that point, actually, the business was the second generation. My great grandfather started that business. That business is still around today. It's actually my cousin's working it, so it's a fourth generation business.
Wow, unreal.
That business is called Freed's of Windsor, so it's my last name, but it's like I said, it's a menswear. There's some ladies too, but like they really focus on like suits and dress wear and stuff like that. And it's in this small town, and they've always had a pretty solid business. My dad, when it was time to go to college, went to the big city, moved to Toronto, which is the center of Canada, if you will, similar to how New York is the center of the United States. And went to undergrad there, decided to become a lawyer, went to law school, stayed in Toronto, got a job. I think it's simple. You basically started as an associate for however many years, and then you become a partner, and he did that and decided sort of by late 30s that this wasn't for him. He was on a pretty solid path. And then, we had, I think I mentioned like my dad's side of the family was in mostly Michigan at the time. And he had a cousin that he's very close with still to this day, that was in our business, in Michigan. Very entrepreneurial, growing fast, considered expansion into even Canada and thought, if we can find a business that's great or that has a lot of potential, maybe you'll just go in and run that business. And so my dad thought that sounded like a pretty good idea. And that is actually how our family got into this business. So he didn't start the business. They bought a small business that was doing 5 or 6 million at the time. I want to say like mid 90s. My dad became the president on the first day that acquisition closed, which I'm sure was interesting given sort of lack of experience. And you had, a bunch of people there that quote unquote knew what they were doing and, had experience in this world. And my dad had business experience growing up in a family business, but, really had to roll up his sleeves. And that company that was with our cousin went through a series of different ownership stories. Actually, at one point sold to Halo. The Halo that we know is almost like a different Halo in that Halo was a public company at the time, eventually filing for Chapter 11. My dad was all part of that story. My dad, eventually, when they joined, he was the president of Halo Canada at the time.
Wow.
And filing, bankruptcy happened, ownership changes a couple times. I'm not going to get into that. And eventually it just made a lot of sense for the Canadian side of the business to be, separated, rolled out separately. And my dad was basically able to do a management buyout. So he had been running that business and growing it for like 10 plus years. And it didn't become our family's business until that acquisition happened, which was in 2004.
Wow. So you grew up around the whole swag industry. Your whole life is like somewhere your dad was doing Halo, that he buys it back, makes it kind of private in some ways. Did that excite you? Was that something like when you were a young kid, did that make you think like, this is what I want to do with my life? Or did you take like the opposite thinking of like, I wanted to get out of the swag world. I want to do everything but swag?
It was almost just there. Like I remember being in first grade. I don't even think I've ever talked about this with him. You know how like when you're younger and like you'll have like the days where a parent comes to work and explains what they do for a living? Like, I remember my dad doing that when I was in the 1st grade and, like, coming and explaining it, and, like, I barely even understood what he was doing because he was talking about doing it for businesses. I remember he used the example of, like, Harley Davidson, which is still a line of ours, and I just remember thinking, like, "Okay, that's a T-shirt, but what is he talking about with" like, I don't know. It sort of never really interested me all that much to be completely honest when I was young. You would go to their office as a kid, and there'd be a lot of things to look at, right? Merches can be exciting and fun and cool, and they always had a fantastic showroom area, so I think as a kid, I always was really impressed by that, but, I don't think I ever really truly even tried to understand what was really going on until I was, like, in high school, when I started actually working there and, like, a little bit, right? Like, I would do summers there, I would do sort of sometimes, like, I remember, like, I think in 12th grade, I almost think I had, like, Friday afternoons off, so then I would go to the office and just, like, work to make a few bucks. So I had been around it when I had sort of, in my late teenage years, but I certainly never dreamed of being there, ever. Um, it wasn't because I don't know. I don't really know why, and I've told this story many times, and I think that I often probably sound I don't know if the word is, like, arrogant or pompous or, like, "How could you not?" or "What an opportunity." Like, of course, all those things are true, but I don't know. It wasn't like the dinner conversation was never like, "Oh, when Mitch joins or when Emma, my sister, joins." Like, it just wasn't that type of environment that I grew up in. Um, to a point where even, like, when I graduated from school, I had my own career, like, I went into management consulting right away. Again, didn't even have a discussion like, "Oh, when I graduate, maybe I'll join Genumark." Like, it wasn't even on my mind.
Did you
Uh,
wanna be a CEO? I mean, I guess, like, swag wasn't on your mind technically, but being, like, a leader and, like or a
yes.
founder,
Yeah.
was that on your mind?
Yes, and I can tell you that the first time that it really hit me that it was on my mind was when, uh, one of my professors in undergrad business school, who was, like, a pretty successful entrepreneur, some of these folks, like, they go do something cool, and they're like, "Oh, I wanna go teach." He was like that kinda guy. And, he was talking about, all these different things that he'd done in his career, and he mentioned an organization called YPO. Have you heard of that?
Yeah,
We
of
got
course, yep.
an organization, so I'm in YPO now, but I remember at the time him explaining what it was all about, YPO. For anyone who doesn't know, like, it's like a peer learning environment. There's 35,000 plus members across the globe. There's, chapters in every major city, not even major city, like, almost every city in the world. And, it's really one of the best networks you could be a part of, I
Yeah,
would say.
I regret not joining. There was, the founder of Custom Ink Marquettes, during the acquisition, he was talking all about YPO. He's a YPO member, and he's like, "You have to apply now. You have to apply now because you have to hit certain benchmarks to be
Yeah,
even considered. You have to have, like, what is it, like, 50 million a year in revenue or, like, an active CEO of that type of thing."
correct.
So, I missed my boat, but maybe next time, next
Yeah,
business.
there you go. So and I highly encourage it. Uh, you gotta do it, I think, before you're 45, so, um, so that's sort of the big thing, but I remember him talking about it, so, I'm probably age 20 or 21. And I remember thinking, whatever I do in my career, I wanna do that, get in that peer group because I just know I would really thrive in an environment like that, and I would just love to learn from people in that way. So I'd like to do something that gets me in there, which is like the first time that I ever was like, "Okay, I guess that means I gotta run a company or I got in some management role somewhere." I was always sort of leaning towards business in my early days, but that's when it became crystal clear. But what's funny is even with that realization, at that age, I still wasn't like, "Oh, well, I guess, the most logical path is to run Genumark one day because of course I could do that." Like, it just took a long time
So
to
you said after business school, you did KPMG, and then you did some other things. So when did it hit you that, "Yes, I do wanna join the family business?"
Yeah, yeah, so I'll tell you. So I went to grad school in Chicago. I went to Kellogg and Northwestern for business school. Coming out of there, I did something entrepreneurial for a few years, and then when that was done, I was like, I'm gonna buy a business." A big, I wouldn't say it's big, but a lot of graduate students, particularly in, like, US business schools, often consider doing something called a search fund, where it's almost like being your own PE shop, where the idea is you buy one business, at least to start, you get some, equity backers, and you basically go in, you buy that business, but you go in and run it on day one. And again, sort of to that point of like wanting to do something like a YPO, like my plan at the time was not to be like a PE person. It was, how can I have some ownership, some stake in something, and run a business? I also was never the type of person that was like, I want to start something from the ground up, which Jeremy, you can speak to, but like, I was like, I'm not going to create something like with this novel idea. Like, I just didn't see myself in that way. It was like, I'd like to take a business that's probably been around for some time and bring it into the future. That felt like a really good fit. And so when I was talking to friends and people in my network that were doing this search fund and looking for a business, it was only then that it was like, well, obviously just forget the search fund thing. Like, just go work in your family's business. I always just assumed that everything was figured out there. I sort of wasn't needed. What value what was I going to add? It was all figured out. That was sort of my state of mind whenever considering it.
I think it's most businesses on the outside, everything looks perfect, and you never really know until you kind of go under the hood and see it. So when you did decide to join your family business, what was your initial role at the company when you joined there?
Oh, pretty typical. It was like head of strategic initiatives, which basically meant like I came from a consulting background. I could poke around. I didn't really know it was almost like a learning job, right? Like I would go and spend a lot of time with our COO, who's still great and who I work really closely with. Obviously, he's still there. I spent a lot of time with him and poking around in different departments, understanding the technology that we were using as a business. Um, and eventually worked with like a select group of salespeople. Then I ran the sales team, and then in 2022, I became CEO. And I first joined in 2017, so I did just over 5 years before we made that transition.
So in those 5 years, I mean, I don't even know if you can remember that time because I'm sure a lot has happened and changed since you joined the CEO or you took over as CEO. What
Mhm.
was like your biggest or your proudest accomplishment during that early period? I mean, you're joining a company that your dad is the CEO of. I'm sure there's some hesitation or like where do I fit in or how am I going to make my lane in the kind of company? What were you, I would say, most proud of in that 5 year period?
I would say, like, not result driven, like, meaning, like, it wasn't, like, X amount of growth or sales dollars. I think as a 2nd gen person going into a business, specifically when you have a parent that is very well respected, there's a daunting task ahead of making people like you, of making people think that you actually deserve to be where you are, and that, nepotism is always a part of it, but I mean, it's like, is this still a good fit despite the relationship, right? And I think what I'm most proud of is when we made the decision in 2022 that I was gonna, step into that role, I think imposter syndrome for me kinda went away. Like, I just feel like I did do the work as best as I could. I'm like, even to this day, I'm sure it's not perfect. And I try and get buy-in from as many people as I can, but I'm proud of myself that I, overcame that fear because I think I put in the work. I think I worked with enough people, showed that I had some talent, that I was hardworking, and I was really ready to roll up my sleeves and just make it a better business and grow the business.
Family businesses to me are like the greatest thing in the world. Like, obviously, one day I want to build a business and pass it on to my kids and have my kids take over, but it's such a rare opportunity, frankly, to be able to, for your dad to be able to pass it off to his son. Because, first of all, he had to be at the time where he wanted to leave or he wanted to not to take a step back. He had
Yeah.
to trust you so much that he said, Mitch, my son is the right guy for this role. He's not just going to give anybody the role. He believed that you were the right guy for the role. But at the same time, you have to want the role and you have to want to be able to overcome that fear of people might be looking at me and judging me that I'm not the right guy for the role. So there's a lot of internal, I would assume, stresses. And if it works out, then it's like magic. And that's why I see so many times of friends of mine who have parents at business, it never works out because there's so many things that get in the way that prevent it from happening. And when it does work out, I always love to hear these stories.
Yeah. And Well, I appreciate you having that point of view. I mean, it's really cool. Like, I'll be honest, like, I'm really lucky. And, all the hard work and all that sweat equity aside, like, just really enjoy working with my dad. Like, it's really cool. And, you know, to be clear, he is still active, maybe not in hours, but certainly in, brain capacity and thinking about the business and the amount of time that we talk through things. But, at this point, it feels like a partnership more than anything. And I don't feel like he's breathing down my neck. I feel like I have space to think and to run with things. Like, I'm really fortunate in that way, because I think that is very much the minority. The way we are able to work together has been awesome.
So you guys made this decision. You're going to take over. It's 2022. How do you actually get it set up for success? Because I could just imagine, I just even know in the swag on a smaller scale, there's a lot of personalities, a lot of people, making sure it's a streamlined experience where your dad is kind of moving into a different role, you're taking over. How did you make sure that things didn't break?
Okay, well, first and foremost, somebody taught me in my first job that if you wanna go for sort of like a promotion or your next role, you gotta be that role without the title for, like, at least 6 months. So I think if anybody really thought about it, we made the announcement, like, end of January, beginning of February of 2022. Like, I think my dad mentally had already taken a step back sort of a year before, and I was almost doing basically everything that I was mandated to do when the role actually shifted. So you can almost think of it as a test run. Like, I don't think my day to day changed all that much when the job title changed,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Totally.
So that made it quite a bit easier. I don't think if anyone really was thinking about it, they would have been surprised. I don't remember if we framed it that way, like, "Oh, like, fake out, I've been doing this for, like, a year." I don't remember if that was part of the announcement, but I probably in side conversations, it was. It was like day to day, it's actually not gonna change much because, like, this is the way it's been. We just sort of caught up with the titles and the changes now. So that was a helpful frame of mind, I would say. So I don't think that there was this huge change that, let's say the announcement was the 27th, like, on the 28th of January, like, it wasn't a different world at our company.
It didn't feel like a different world, but you definitely had more, I guess, eyes on you as like the
That
face.
that would have been the biggest change, and we did our press releases and certainly outside of the company. And, it's a very, like, insular industry, like,
Totally.
people really know each other, and it's a very tight-knit industry, like, whether it's, like, vendor, distributor, wholesaler relationship or, uh, even, like, there's a lot of friendly competition in our industry, like, a shocking amount. Like, I have a lot of friends in this industry that are technically my competitors that I can just call. So, those types of eyes start getting on you when the announcement's made. Um but I'll be honest, like, from a young age, I had a bit of like a performance background. Like, I sort of knew how to handle the spotlight in different ways in my life, maybe not so much in business, but I wasn't super uncomfortable with that, to be honest.
Awesome.
Um,
So you join as CEO, you take over. What
mhm.
is the first kind of thing that you want to accomplish? Because I'm sure as you've been at the company for 5 years, you see problems, you see things that you could fix, and maybe it's not your position at that point to make those fixes or make those changes. Like, what was your kind of like goal? Now I'm the CEO. This is what I want the next 5 years to look like.
I think usually there's a specific mandate, right, when a CEO comes in, and for me, it is growth and has always been growth, and it has not been easy, just to be clear. Like, it has been challenging. It's a challenging environment, first of all, just in when you look at the global markets. We're just coming out of a pandemic. That being said, like, 2022 for us was just a phenomenal year, as it was for many, many people. So I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be great." Our path to growth, like, I'm already in it. I'm seeing it. And then 23, 24 were not super easy years for us. Um so I would say, like, first and foremost, like, we do have a path and a plan to grow our business, and that is still, the North Star. But with that, become puts a lot of pressure on people internally. We have a very, I think, pretty unique culture, and like, we say we're big enough to matter and small enough to care. We want our customers to see that, and we also want our people to see that. So as you grow, that small enough to care piece gets harder and harder, right? Um, and for me, it's like maintaining that balance of, um, seeing growth, becoming like a real consideration for any company that wants to take merch seriously. I'd love our business to be in the conversation as a provider, uh, to help a business with their sort of merch solutions. I I think it's challenging to be both, right? To try and grow that top line number while maintaining this great culture that we've always had. But that's that's really like my goal. It's to maintain that unique story of being big enough to matter, yet small enough to care throughout all phases of our journey, which will be hard. It will be a challenge.
And I know that you guys have done a couple of acquisitions over the years. Most recently, one was just even last year. The Pathwave acquisition, if I'm correct, it basically got you more exposed to the Americas, right? Because historically, you guys been exclusively a Canadian-based distributor, but now you guys are actually focusing on the US.
We are for sure. So that would be like my biggest sort of like that was my um I think that's the biggest shift for us over the last couple years. Certainly when I became CEO, it was like we need to make a real run south of the border. And that has been our most obvious shift in our path to growth. We've been able to do that with some of our current team members, even the ones that are in Canada. Pathwave, the same thing. So folks from that acquisition are actually still based in Canada with I want to say predominantly US focused customer base. So that's sort of like a perfect fit given our strategic goals, actually. And then we've hired a bunch of really incredible people in the US, particularly on the sales side, to help us get there. So, that has been a big shift for growth. Canada is a very mature market. There's only so many blue chip companies. Um, and when you have sort of a portfolio of blue chip companies, I would say um, that portfolio becomes, assuming you're doing a great job, but hopefully it's a sticky portfolio and those customers stay with you a long time. So to achieve like the growth that I want to see, I felt like it was very challenging to do by staying specifically focused on our country, on Canada. And listen, like with globalization, even with COVID and just seeing how virtual our world can be, doing business across all of North America, there's complexities, but it's not that complicated. It's not as complicated as it was 15 years ago, right? So, yes, our business has changed in that way for sure, and that's definitely been the biggest change since I've become CEO.
Is the market very different, or is it just like a different country? Because it's the same in your
It's
mind?
it's so similar.
So similar.
No, it's really not that different. And you know why I say that too? It's because like, um, parts of Canada are different from one another, and we're in the East Coast, we're in the West Coast, we're in the center part of the country. Like, there's different nuances to everywhere that you're selling, and the U.S. is the exact same way. It's just that in the U.S. there just is so much more opportunity for the big wins, for finding like-minded clients that will really gel with sort of our way of doing business. There's just more companies to go after and to try and work with. It just really opens things up, and I think we just had this imaginary border all these years that just sort of kept that off limits, and I think it was time to break down that border. Uh, so, yeah, like I said, that's a big shift in our thinking and in our business over the last
Right.
4 years.
Much bigger opportunity, much bigger customer segment.
Totally.
Um,
There's
and
more
you
opportunities, like,
Yep,
there's just more.
yep. And you also became a B Corp in 2023. What prompted that? And how and what is I don't even know what the process is like to become a B Corp. How do you even get that?
Yeah, of course. So B Corp is a challenging certification to get. I think when you make a decision on any of these accreditation certifications, you have to decide sort of what's right for you. I felt that as a company, like we were in terms of our day to day practice, like we were really close to becoming a B Corp way before we even uh, decided to actually go for it. Um, I just see so much. First of all, the B Corp community is a great community for us to be a part of. I feel in our industry and just sort of beyond our industry, I would say like most companies that we know, they're really like B2C companies that are B Corps. So that it's a little unique that way for us to be a B Corp. Although, like I said, like we definitely are not the first movers in our industry. Though we still are one of the largest in our industry to have um, the B Corp certification. But listen, I mean, it's just the people that you're around within the industry. Like I just felt like we could be there, we could be part of that story, and we do live in a bit of an RFP world where when we're trying to win new business, like there is a process to go through, and I still feel to this day that if we can in our second or third sentence tell a prospect that we're a B Corp, there's a lot less questions that follow. I think it's a really nice way to, you know draw a line in the sand and say, like, we care about this. The whole concept becoming a B Corp is it's for-profit company, so it's not meant for charities, but it's meant for companies that are doing more in the world than just trying to be profitable. They're trying to do good in the world, right? And I just felt like um, it made our story a lot more succinct and sound. Our elevator pitch became a lot more clear with that accreditation, with that certification. So how do you become a B Corp? I mean, you start, it's an online portal and you got to answer a ton of questions, and it's like an 18-month plus process to become certified. It's a big deal. Like it's not an easy thing to achieve, and you got to be focused on it. You need to think within your company, like who is going to take care of this and who is gonna, because it's a job. Like it's not just something that you can do off the side of your desk. So definitely needs commitment. But I heard about the B Corp certification back when I joined the industry in 2017, and I just thought, wow, if we could work towards that, that would be a pretty incredible thing
Mhm.
to do. And
So, you,
so a year after I became CEO, we became a B Corp.
so that's amazing. So you're a CEO for 2022. It's only been 3 years. You handle an acquisition. You become a B Corp. A lot of changes. You're expanding into the U.S. Where do you see Genumark in the next 5 years?
I mean, I can tell you, it's funny. So we're an EOS company. Have you heard of EOS? I think it stands for the Entrepreneur Operating System. Um, it's been great for us. So there's this book called Traction that's very famous. It's written by this guy Gino Wickman, and that book has sort of led into uh, this EOS framework where a lot of companies actually in our industry do follow it. It's basically like an accountability framework uh, for a company. I come from a management consulting background, so for me, like I don't do well in ambiguity at all. I had a couple of friends that went down this EOS path, and basically, like if you're doing it full out, which we did, it's not just about reading this book, Traction, but it's about like getting an implementer and helping you, um, bringing in processes and frameworks. And the biggest thing for us is like we just know how to run a meeting now, and we know how to hold people accountable, and we know how to communicate with each other way better. So for me, that was another big decision that I made when I became CEO. I just felt like I needed more structure in the day to day with my team, with each other. And you asked me about what's our 5-year plan. Because we're an EOS company, I can tell you what our 1 year, our 3 year, and uh, our 1 year and our 3 year plan, which is really like it's almost like 5 years.
Let's give us 3 years then. What's your 3-year plan?
Well, I have a certain growth target that I won't mention here, but the number is very clear. Everyone in our company knows what that is. I know how many Canadian staff I want, how many US staff I want. I know what I want my profit margins to be, and I know what the company will look like. Um, which is like, what technology tools I think we're going to be using. I call ourselves, we're going to be a AI proficient house at that point or business, which I would say we barely are at this point. So we have a lot of work to do to get to where I know we need to be to stay ahead and to be really competitive in that space. Because wow, there's so much change that is about to come market. Um, and Yeah, I mean, I'm staying broad sort of on purpose, but I can tell you that, like, offline I could show you, and it's quite clear, um, what the vision is for us, um, and sort of how we're gonna get there, which I'm not really gonna disclose
No,
now.
I'm even just looking at you. You seem like you have this energy and excitement about where you're going, which I know from my perspective as being the leader of a company, you have to take that energy, you have to believe in it, and oftentimes it's the only way it ever works if you have that
Y
feeling.
what's great though is, like, because of the way we've done it, like, if you asked me that question in 2022, I wouldn't have known. Really, I would probably just been I sort of sounded I realized, like, wasn't trying to be cryptic on this, but I'm not getting into details right now.
Totally, totally.
But but what's cool about it is through this process and through this way of running the business through this EOS way, like, I actually didn't even come up with that 3-year vision myself. Like, it was totally working with my core, uh, leadership team of there's 7 of us. It was a lot of back and forth. It's revisiting it every quarter. Are we still on that path? Are there things we need to change? So I'm probably responsible for communicating it to the company, which we do, by the way, every quarter at every quarterly town hall. But I didn't come up with it myself. Like, that's the beauty of it. Like, if you have a great team like I do, like, it becomes almost just like quarterbacking a process to get you to this vision that you can use all the smart brains around you to get you there. So we've just become way better at that over the last 3, 5 years, just like using the resources, the people that we have to help craft our vision and where we think we're gonna go and how and how are we gonna get there. Um, so
Amazing.
yeah, it's fun.
Mitch, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
It's a
You know,
pleasure.
I feel weird. Like I want to talk to all the leaders of our industry, and that's kind of the point of this podcast for me also to learn, but me also just to kind of um, have you kind of tell your story because I think it gives people inspiration who are going to be listening and seeing what it takes to build such a company. But I always feel kind of awkward asking people for their time because I know how busy it is to be in that role. So I do appreciate you taking the time.
It's a pleasure. And listen, I know you're mostly talking to entrepreneurs. I almost refer to myself as I guess I'm more of an intrapreneur. Like, it would be a lie to say I started this business. I've certainly, like, help charter the path of where it's gonna go, but we're definitely being entrepreneurial within our
Totally.
business. So thanks for, letting me tell the story, even though I may not be the typical sort of prototype of person that I guess.
There's no typical here. We're just talking to the kings of swag, and you're definitely one of them.
Oh,
So
that's very kind.
thanks,
Very
Mitch.
That was so nice. I appreciate
Awesome.
it.
Of course.